Hello, everybody. So we are going to go ahead and start with this first section of interpersonal communication. By now, you should have already read the first chapter as well as taken a look at the PowerPoint presentations that's attached under the week 1 module. I am trying things a little bit differently. I don't want to just regurgitate what the textbook says. So these videos that you'll see me are just supplemental, but still very important information. I will go through the assignment for the week if there's an assignment assigned that week, and I will kind of break down the information you learned in the textbook in more relatable terms, so to speak. So in more life experience rather than what the text says. So in this chapter, you have mostly just learned what interpersonal communication is, which is really interpersonal consists of communication that happens between two people, and based on your relationship with that person, communication can differ from person to person or from conversation to conversation. It also explains what intrapersonal communication is, which is just one person. So you're talking to yourself and working things out internally. But this is interpersonal communication. So that's what we'll be talking about. I mentioned in my intro video that I worked in television news for 3 years. I often had to speak with people and communicate with some hard topics. Of course, we cover crime, we cover death, we cover tragedy, we cover great things too, sporting events, championships, important games, things like that. So for my example, from a real life perspective, we hear this word a lot, and you'll hear this word in your careers a lot, but it's rapport. Building rapport is very important for interpersonal communication. So in an example where I maybe had to talk to a store owner about a break-in, and the first time I spoke to them, they had asked, this is actually a straight up true story, they had a serial break-in. This burglar was breaking into a bunch of different businesses, taking money out of their vaults or out of their safes, and dipping. Well, a beloved bar had their safe ransacked by said burglar, and in that safe also contained the ashes of a former employee that was beloved by the community, by the workers, by the patrons, and now these ashes are missing. It's a hard story to come into and say, can you tell me about your friend's ashes? Why were they in the safe? All questions people are going to be wondering from a journalist perspective is, why were they in the safe? What are you going to do with them? How are you going to get them back? What are the police doing? Things like that. But those can come across kind of insensitive if you're considering the fact that there is a death in this story. Somebody has passed away. You have a tight connection with them. And now somebody's just coming up and saying like, hey, what are you going to do if you don't find the ashes? So, building the relationship is really important. Building rapport is really important with this kind of story. The first story may not have been so smooth, but I was able to develop a relationship with the store owner. And when we did follow-up stories, as rewards for finding the ashes came out and stuff like that, the store owner was a lot more willing to speak to me than somebody new or somebody from another station who maybe hadn't been following the story from the jump. So interpersonal communication is super reliant on the context, and we'll talk about that too, but also the relationship in which you build with the person that you're communicating with. So that's a weird story, but I wrote about somebody's ashes being stolen. But that is also a great example of the importance of interpersonal communication and relationship building. The textbook also runs through just some stats, and I actually took this from the textbook because I think it's really interesting. 56, and I'm going to run through some of these. 56 is the number of hours per week that the average American spends on digital media. 56 hours. Okay, so generally speaking, a full-time job, people work 40 hours a week, and that's exhausting. And yet we find a way for the average American To be online, that is chronically online. You are online for 56 hours, unpaid, mind you, for most of it. Unless you work in digital media, that's a lot of time to be going unpaid or unrested. 66% of US Americans sleep with or next to their cell phones. I am super guilty of this, and I know that there's stats and data out there that suggest that, actually I don't know where my phone is right now, but that suggest that your phone, being on your phone just before bed is disruptive for your REM cycle. It will not stop me from using my cellular device before I go to bed. I oftentimes fall asleep doom scrolling on my phone. So I thought that was 66%. That's a lot of people. And you got to consider like 66, so that's what, 34%, and how many of that 34% are just too old to use their phones or like don't use social media. Thought that was really cool. 3,853. That is the number of text messages the average American young adult sends per month. I am a chronic double texter, triple texter. I won't put one thing in one thought. I'll go dum, 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 dum. And I know that that's not appealing to some, but that's a lot of text messages. Let me see some of the other good ones. 3.5 billion. I think I have my glasses on. That is the number of photos that you send daily on Snapchat. I don't use Snapchat very often anymore, but that does strike me as that's a lot. And this is all, everything that I'm talking about is a form of communication. We are communicating in new ways with technology and with digital media. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. But there are good things and there are bad things about the new way that we learn. And part of that, and I'm going to kind of go out of order in what your textbook talks about, is something we call phubbing. And phubbing essentially is, and I'm sure we've all been through this before, but phubbing is like when somebody's on their phone while you're being talked to. Maybe you're having lunch with somebody and they're always checking their phone. Oh, I got a text message. Oh, I got, or maybe you're having a conversation with mom and mom's on her phone, or vice versa. If maybe you're a parent and you're on your child's just doom scrolling and you can hear the sound of TikToks while you're trying to have a conversation with them, it feels very neglectful. You feel like you're not being cared, or your opinion or whatever you're saying or whatever you're doing isn't enough for the person in front of you, that they need more sources of entertainment, even in this one-on-one time. That is phubbing. And it is something that probably even 10 years or less ago we wouldn't be talking about, because technology has come so far. So you can only imagine what it's going to look like 10 years from now, and why interpersonal communication is so important to continue to study, because we're just out here trying to learn how people are going to continue to communicate in this new tech, in this new digital lifestyle. So phubbing, that's probably one of my favorite things to say and to talk about, because it does happen and we don't even think about it and we use weird words for it. But part of that is human need. Whether you think you're an introvert or an extrovert, there is an innate need as humans for other human interaction. I know the textbook explains a really depressing version of this like German doctor that took 50 kids and says, hey, don't touch them, don't talk to them, don't love them, don't nurse them, just keep them basically alive, but don't give them any of the bonus, if so to speak. Instead of giving you that one, let's just all think back to where we were during the pandemic. We lived through it. Excuse me. We lived through something traumatic to some, who, when we sit at home and we're told not to socialize with one another, stay within your household and don't go outdoors, and it's a traumatic thing to experience, especially because we know as humans we need that human interaction. During the pandemic, I was in grad school and I lived with only one other person, my partner at the time, and at one point he got COVID, and that was my last straw really of connection, because now he had to go into quarantine and I couldn't be around him. So it's really interesting, and I want you to sit and think about a time during the pandemic that maybe you felt neglected or you felt like you needed human contact and you couldn't have it because of the time we were in. So that is something to consider, and I'll let you sit on that for a minute while I go into our next section here. So we all think, and I know that this is a myth that the first chapter busted, that being intelligent means that you're a good communicator or vice versa. And those two are not mutually exclusive, exclusive. Being the smartest, being a genius does not make you a good communicator. And I know the textbook references Sheldon from Big Bang Theory, and it's a great reference, honestly. Using Sheldon, who was, he had 3 PhDs, he had the highest IQ, and he could not hold a conversation. He couldn't communicate. He couldn't read social cues, and social cues are very important. And then you had Penny, who maybe didn't have a degree or was academically successful, but was a great communicator and knew how to read the room and do things socially acceptable and build rapport. She also knew how to push Sheldon buttons, and that was kind of funny too. But it is a big myth, and I don't want you to think throughout this course that just because you don't feel like the smartest or you don't have the highest IQ that you can't be a great communicator. You absolutely can. And hey, if you have a high IQ and you still don't think that you have great communication skills, this is a great course for you too. It helps you, it helps people around you. So take time to read some chapters, listen to me babble on. This asynchronous teaching is also very difficult for somebody like me who does feed off of interaction and body language and eye contact. So really, I've just been talking to myself for the last 12 minutes. And it's a form of communication that, again, we're studying, we're learning how to deal with, and we're hoping it doesn't affect the longevity or the long-term of communication, because obviously there's some disconnect here. I don't know when you're watching it, in what environment you're watching it in, what mental state you're in when you're watching it. So I can only hope that this reaches you in a good state. So yeah, Sheldon, I always think of Sheldon. He's really smart, but he had terrible communication skills. So don't think that those are mutually exclusive. Now, let's take it into a little bit more of like a research perspective. We're talking about models of communication, and there's 3. And these models of communication, they essentially just build off of each other. Like the action model was created, and it said communication is a sender sending a message to a receiver with the intent that the receiver decodes that message as intended by the sender. That is a great that's a great way to define communication, but it's missing a lot. It lacks a lot. And it lacks its channel lean context. So we'll get into that a little bit. But then you have the interaction model, and that adds another little layer. So now you're talking about interaction where the sender is sending a message to the receiver. The receiver is decoding it and then sending a message back. And those happen exclusive from another. One sends, decodes, stops, sends back, decodes, stops. And that's it. That's the interaction model. And while this one seems like it's more fulfilling of how we converse daily, it still does miss some aspects, like the noise, or not so necessarily the noise, but the back and forth that we have in real life communication. And that takes us to the transactional communication model, which you will see more of every day, or more of what you would consider communication today. And that includes a lot of pieces in it. I'm going to pull it up, so just give me just 2 seconds, because if you have this in your textbook, you could honestly Google. It tends to bring up everything, but whereas in the interaction model has the sender-receiver message going back and forth, in between. The transactional communication model has everything going at once. Just imagine it as like two things constantly moving in a machine. So clarify. Interaction. This way, message, message, message. Transaction. It's like two big circles moving at the same time. And that means that the source is also, the sender is also the receiver on both ends, or the receiver is also the sender. And their job is to encode and decode the message at the same time. And now we're talking about the channel. We're looking at the channel in which they're sending the message, the noise that could get in between the message and misinterpret the message, the context in which they're sending it. This is something that we talk about more in this semester, so don't panic that I'm kind of rushing through this. It is in your textbook, and like I said, something you should have read by now, so I'm not going to go super deep into it. But it's important to look at these models and then understand that we use the word context. Context also comes, or something within context could also be the perceptual filters that we think in. If there's something that you guys will learn about me this semester is I do love to teach in pop culture references. I think for the most part, they're pretty relatable. I can use sports references too. I have a decent history with that, but we'll try this one first. So perceptual, we're thinking of a communication that broke down. Best example is if anyone here is a Friends fan, or maybe just like a pop culture fan, because this specific scene gets referenced a lot. In Friends, there is an episode where the character Ross and the character Rachel, who are dating, decide to take a break. Okay. During this break, Ross gets with somebody else. Rachel finds out and gets so mad. And he says, "We were on a break." And the way it breaks down here is neither of them understood what the other's definition of break was. And so it's super important because that goes back to context, that goes back to perception. And so what I perceive as a break, or what you can and cannot do on a break, might be different than someone else. So this is something that we always come back to, because the age-old argument is, well, is Ross in the wrong? Did Ross do something he shouldn't have while they were on a break? So that's something really interesting. If you haven't seen it, go ahead and look it up. It's funny. It's a great way to explain how communication can break down when you're not considering all the aspects of the moving wheels in the transactional communication model. And this also goes back to communication being not just verbal, because in the scene itself, you also see just how they riff off of one another, with the way that if she steps back, she can tell that he can tell that she's becoming more detached. And so we go into communication is not just verbal. Communication can be eye contact. It can be body language. It can be physical touch. When you're in a job interview and you want to thank them for their time, you're shaking their hand, you're agreeing with with everything that was said. Maybe you're making good eye contact to let them know that you're paying attention. Or if you're in a meeting or a class and maybe you start to doze off and you're slouching and your eyes are closing and your teacher's thinking that maybe you're checked out, you're not very interested in what they have to say, or maybe the teacher thinks that they're not doing a good job. Asynchronous courses online. This is hard because, again, I don't get the nonverbal part of communication from you guys because I can't see your body language. You're not making eye contact with me. There's no physical aspect, even though I try not to shake hands. I do like high fives in class sometimes. But communication is not just verbal. So you have to keep in mind as you go through life that even if what you say is what you mean, you have to be mindful of how you say it with your body or your eyes. Okay, so we're going to go back a little bit to talking about the channels of communication and how in that transactional communication model, there's things called channel-rich context and channel lean. So channel rich on the very left side or right side, whichever one you want to go. We're talking about face-to-face conversation. This is the best, in personal opinion, way to communicate because you're seeing people, you get to read their body language, they can read your body language, and there's less noise. There still can be psychological noise or environmental noise. But for the most part, you can still read, decode, and send back a message because you can see that person. Then going a little step lower, you have the live video conferences like Zooms, where you still can respond in transactional communication model time. But as you go down the line to context or channel lean context, now we're looking at, if you go to the very, very far end, say you are walking in the hallways in class or in the school building and you see a message board and there's letters or announcements posted on a message board, that would go from transactional all the way to action communication model, because that sender is sending you a message in a specific channel in a form of a document, hoping that you as the receiver decodes the message as it's intended. There is no way for immediate response or feedback for that communication. So it's really important that they get it right the first time, or hope that the way that they send it is exactly how you wanted to receive it. Going back a little further towards the middle now, we're shrinking. And if you want to see this is a graphic that is also in your textbook. A personal letter or a memo, again, sending something to someone can still be considered an action model communication, because you are sending them a letter, and there's no action for immediate response, or there's no place for immediate response. And then of course, as you get into the middle, you get text messages. There's immediate response, but you're still missing out on some of the physical aspects of body language, eye contact, physical touch, or online chats or phone calls, things like that. So communication is a spectrum from transactional communication model to action communication model, and some of the best communication can happen on both ends. That's not to say one's better than the other. It's just one has more, if that's an easy way to put it. Going in, we're coming to the last few minutes, so hopefully you've bared with me. The textbook explains this, but I think that this is something that we definitely need to touch on, is that people give words meanings. Words are just symbols without us. If I say something to my mom that maybe is, so some context here. My mom's Portuguese, an immigrant from Portugal to Canada. If I get sent her a message from here and I said, "Hey mom, I don't like your cooking." Contextually, and the meaning I'm giving it, especially in the context that my mom is an immigrant who prides herself in her cooking, is I have just uttered the worst insult. And don't get me wrong, in most cultures, I'm assuming people would be pretty insulted. So like, I don't like your cooking. But the level in which I've insulted her is different because of the context. So it could also be that I could go, maybe the cooking one wasn't a great example. Let's see if I can do better. If I go and I ask my teacher for the answers on a quiz, that teacher's going to be pretty insulted and be like, "No, you have to study, you have to do your work." If you take that same sentence and you take it to a fellow classmate, they might say, "Yeah, sure." If you've built good rapport with them and they're a friend, they might already have given you the answers. Don't do that, especially because our quizzes are open book. Try harder. But because of the context of the relationship I had with them and their role in the quiz, that's different. You gave different meanings to to the same words because of the context in which you said them or who you said them to. So just know that you have a lot of power in the things you say, and be mindful of how you say them and who you say them to. Another way that we give words meanings, and this is going to be great, and I'm so sorry ahead of time, but Gen Z slang is the best way that I can explain this. People give words meanings. If I went to my 65-year-old mother and I said, "That's lit," she would probably look around and go, "What's lit? I don't see anything. Did you light a candle?" Something like that, probably. But if I said that's lit to somebody in my age bracket, they would probably understand that I meant like, that's cool. That's off the chain. I feel so gross saying all this. Anyways, other things like dope, tea, no cap, stan. Stan is a man's name to some, but to certain generations, it's you really like something. You're a stan. You're a not a Swiftie stan, because that doesn't count, because Swifties are Swifties. Yeah, or no cap. I actually don't even know if I understand what that means. Tea, like not the cup, but if you talk to someone in the UK, they could be like, "Ooh, a cup of tea." Dope to some people could mean pot, which again to some people could mean a pot, or marijuana or ganja. There's so many different ways because different cultures and different communities say different things. So again, going back to it, people give words meanings, and the context in which you say them is really important. So keep that in mind. Also keep in mind is unintentional communication. Unintentional communication is how your body language perceives, like your body language could perceive interest. Going back to the example of if I was giving you this presentation and I'm half off the screen and I'm not looking at you and I'm using monotone voice, those are all unintentional communication. If I'm actually interested and I don't mean to come off as uninterested, but my body language and my tone is coming across that way, somebody might check out and it's not how I intended it. So always be mindful that you can never not communicate. Anything you do is a form of communication. Scholars debate this all the time, but I am firmly in the camp that you're always communicating, because no words or no movement or sitting here stoically and just staring at you, it gives off the look of disinterest. And so I feel like you're always communicating, and so keep that in mind. There is a myth that in the textbook I wanted to address, and one of them is talking versus communicating. Talking is just words. It's just reading things out loud or saying things out loud. But communicating, and this is where interpersonal, it's a perfect way to wrap this up, interpersonal communicating is sharing with another person. Sharing ideas, sharing emotions, sharing ideologies, sharing perspectives. So going into the world this week, think about the things you learned in this chapter. And as we do that, I'm going to jump into this week's assignment. And this week's assignment, I will pull it up. Of course, I am signed out, so I'm going to move the computer for a second while I sign in. And this week's assignment is the This Is Me assignment. It is not meant to give you something hard and intense to do on your first week. No one wants that. All it is trying to make this asynchronous course feel a little more like you're in person, all the good in-person aspects of it anyways. And so that means that what we're going to do is we're going to go into Canvas, and we're going to into your coursework under week 1 module. You should be able to see that This Is Me, and if you click on it, as I'm trying to now, it will be due Sunday at midnight, so that will be on, I'm trying to pull up the calendar, August 24th at midnight. And pretty much what it is I want you guys to communicate with each other. tell me about yourself. I apologize. I said that it's this is me assignment. It's actually called Tell Me About Yourself. Don't confuse it. My apologies. So pretty much introduce yourself. Give us your basic information, your name, your major, where you're from, and include an icebreaker. So in the intro video that I sent you guys, I told you, hi, my name is Allison Kanuha. I was a communication major at the University of North Dakota. I am from Winnipeg, Manitoba, which is in Canada. And some icebreakers is what made you choose Cape Fear Community College? What's a fun fact about you that somebody may not know? What's the most interesting place you've traveled to? Once you've completed yours, go ahead, it's in the discussion section. Go ahead and respond to at least 2 other classmates. This is not worth a whole ton of percentage grade, but it is still worth something, and it helps us to come together as a class. There's about 30 of us, and we're all taking this at different times asynchronously. So it's just kind of bringing us together, being communicators. So take a look at that. And if you have any questions about the Tell Yourself assignment, you can go ahead and reach out to me. My email is in the syllabus, arkanuha830@mail.cfcc.edu. And if there's anything that you have questions about this video, the chapter, the PowerPoints, feel free to bring them up. This was my first video for the semester, so I apologize if it's a little rough, but I look forward to sending you more videos this semester.